Kenya's political environment has been marred with a lot of violence, especially in the recent future. And this was especially after the 2024 June protest, where a lot of Gen Z lost their lives, right? A while back, or a couple of days back, when they're commemorating the death of the Gen Z last year, there was also a lot of police brutality and also a lot of people died. However, there is one thing that we need to be very clear about, and we also need to remember that the type of violence that we are experiencing right now in our country has been the history of our country, especially when politics are involved or when you involve the political class. So what did I do? I went ahead and researched our political environment since 1992. I could have gone past the 90s, but I figured that is 30 years. I think that could give us a good idea of how the political landscape has been since then. It might shock you that the same players who were there in 1992 when we were babies are still the key players today in the political. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only, for educational purposes and entertainment purposes only. Also because it's something interesting. It was very interesting for me to see how we're still in the same position over 30 years later. Anyway, hi everyone, I'm Wambui and welcome to the Shift Podcast. So, the first section is in 1992, so it was the first time Kenya held its first multi-party election. So multi-party means that before 1992, we only had one party in Kenya, and that party was Kenya African National Union. That is the only party that was there before 1992. So after 1992, that was when, you guessed it, after a lot of protests, the then president allowed Kenya, because I think that was an executive order also, 1992, and the key players then were, of course, Daniel Moi. Of course, Daniel Moi took over power after the death of Kenyatta, so of course he had to be a very big key player then. And then number 2 was Mwai Kibaki. Number 3 was Kenneth Matiba, and then Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga also came into prominence as a key figure in 1992. And if you were to research backwards, you could see that Raila Odinga was also part of the coup in 1980 something. I forgot it, and I will try and put it here. So we had then, and that is 1992, we had Raila Odinga, who was running under the National Democratic Party, NDP. Kenneth Matiba again, Mwai Kibaki, who was for DP, that is Democratic Party of Kenya, and then Moi. That is 1992. So in 1992, during those elections, something key happened. There was also ethnic violence erupted during the campaign, particularly in the Rift Valley region. One key thing you have to keep in mind about the Rift Valley region, it is home to 2 major tribal groups in the country. We have the Kikuyu and the Kalenjin. And based on the people you've seen who were vying for the presidency, you can see who they were fighting for. That is, if you're Kenyan, yes. So there were reports of systemic attacks on opposition strongholds and widespread ethnic violence that resulted into thousands of deaths and displacement of people. However, as we all know, the outcome of that election was that Daniel Arap Moi won that election. That is 1992. Right? Moving on forward to 1997, the 1997 election, the key players were, 1, of course, Daniel Arap Moi. Number 2, again, we had Mwai Kibaki of the DP. And then 3, again, Raila Odinga. That is 97. And then we had a new person who came into the game, and that was Simeon Nyachai, who was also a former senior member in the government. He ran for presidency on an as an independent candidate, right? However, still in 1997, the elections saw a widespread of violence, particularly again in the Rift Valley, with the clashes between ethnic groups supporting different political parties. But honestly, the Rift Valley, we only have Kikuyu and Kalenjin, right? Only those people are as in mostly. And then the other party that could have been fighting for is Raila Odinga was vying, so that is Nyanza. That's a Nyanza vote, right? Yes. However, I always struggle with Raila because he was a member of parliament for Langata for so long. And that is Nairobi. But then again, we are not here for that. So in 1997, of course, a sitting in Africa, especially even in Kenya, it's very hard for a sitting president not to win an election. So as expected, in 1997, Daniel Arap Moi won the election despite growing opposition and call for reforms. You get. Since 92, the first multi-party election in 1992 was a call for reform. That was a result of a reform. The multi-party election was a result of for reform. And then 1997, the elections were held, but against a lot of opposition and all that, Moi still won. 2002, this is very key because this is the first time Moi is transitioning power. We see Moi choosing his protege. You see? This, after everything that I've read, the person that Moi chose, it was expected that he would have chosen somebody who was already in the political environment. That would have been somebody like our current President Ruto, who maybe we'll see later on how he started out in politics. He started out in politics quite young, actually. And I believe he was either in his early 20s or mid-20s based on when he started for Youth for Kano before he became the Member of Parliament for Rongai. So during this transition of power, Moi made a different move that was quite unexpected and brought in Uhuru Kenyatta. Uhuru Kenyatta, of course, who was the son of the other former president, Jomo Kenyatta, into the political playing field. Predecessor. So his protege. Let's call him his protege. I am sure this made a lot of people mad because even if I'm in a particular field and then I've been working in that particular field for so long, and then when somebody's choosing a successor, they decide to go with somebody who was never even part of the game. So in 2002, this is when things changed a little bit. So the key players in that election were Daniel Arap Moi, but he was just playing the politics because he wanted to influence the voting in of Uhuru Kenyatta. And then this was also when Kibaki was also vying and Raila Odinga was also vying. So you see, Kibaki vied for presidency since 1992 and Raila Odinga the same thing. But I think like later on, Raila and Mwai Kibaki decided to form a coalition, the National Rainbow Coalition, so that now they could go against Moi, now Kanu, and they won against now Daniel Arap Moi and Uhuru Kenyatta. So I think that 2002 elections was one of the elections in this country that did not come off as quite violent as other elections in this country have been. But only because I think the thought process around this was we are fighting against a common enemy. And the common enemy here was to be Moi. And he left. And his protege Uhuru Kenyatta was introduced to the political field, and then I think, of course, he became president much later on. However, the post-election violence of the mother of them all was in 2002, the presidential election and the post-election violence. So here we have new political players. Kibaki was the president, right? And then we had Raila Odinga, and Raila Odinga was backed by our now president. If you remember very well, under the ODM and the Orange Democratic Movement, which was formed during the referendum. Now that's another side now to explore. And then we also had Kalonzo Musyoka, who was he ran under the ODM Kenya Function, and also Uhuru Kenyatta, who was also on Kibaki side. So here, the key political figures there were people who were Kibaki. Kibaki was running with Uhuru. Under PNU, Kibaki under PNU, Uhuru was also for Kanu. Remember, Uhuru came into the political field in 2002 and all that. So, and then we had the ODM side in 2004 where we had Kalonzo Musyoka and Raila Odinga. So during this event, this was the most contentious election in the recent past back then. The elections results were disputed, with Kibaki declared the winner amid accusation of widespread voter fraud. The announcement of Kibaki's victory led to violent protests across the country. Remember, because I was in high school, some people did not report to school early enough. And then also it was the year where I met new people who came to our school because they had been displaced from the Rift Valley. So the outcome of this, and also, mind you, I'm giving a summary. I just want us to see that whatever is happening in this era right now, it's not new. It's not new, and there have been people who have been fighting, but the thing is we cannot continue living like this. The outcome is a power-sharing agreement was brokered by international mediators, including the former Secretary General Kofi Annan. I think if you are a Kenyan, you know that anybody who wants to broker a peace, and if you didn't know, that is where the reference came. And that is how we had the coalition government with Raila Odinga as the prime minister. Fast forward to 2013, and this was a historic election because this was after the passing of the 2010 new constitution in our country. So here we had three political players. I want you to keep in mind that these people are not changing. One, we have Uhuru Kenyatta, who was running for president under the Jubilee, a coalition of TNA and other parties. TNA are those parties that are affiliated to KANU. And then we had Raila Odinga from 1992, say to 2013. He's still there, running for president under the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy. It was called CORD back then. And then we have our now president, William Ruto, Kenya's running mate. Kenyatta's running mate, former ODM member, and a deputy president candidate. So in 2013, the one thing is that the elections were fairly peaceful. They were fairly peaceful. But I remember because this was the first election I ever voted in. They were fairly peaceful as compared to 2003, because 2003 people were burnt down, lots of people displaced, lots of people died. I feel like the people who tell Kenya's stories fail to no, and I take that back, because it is our responsibility to tell these stories. But I feel like there is a story to be told about 2007 that a lot of people fail to understand the intensity and how much it affected people. So this, in 2017, the election was contentious, with Raila Odinga claiming that the election was rigged. But then again, Uhuru Kenyatta was declared the winner in 2017, but results were annulled by the Supreme Court due to irregularities in the electoral process, and a fresh election was held on October 17. And this is where Maraga now comes in. Right now, we know Maraga wants to vie for presidency. So back then, Maraga was the chief justice that ordered for the new presidential election. Now, the funny thing, when that happened, Raila Odinga told his people to boycott the election. So, of course, Uhuru won. In my books, 2022 was the most peaceful election and the most peaceful transition of power. I will say that hands down. You know why? Because we are in a situation whereby the sitting president was supporting another person who did not win. But he peacefully transitions the power to the winner, of course, who happened to be also his deputy at one point. It was quite peaceful and everything went on well, and that is how we are here today. So the takeaway from this, I'm going to do a part 2 with Ruto's history in politics, and to see how far he's come and maybe why we're in the position we're in today. But one thing that you're supposed to see here as Kenyans is we have the same crop of people since 1992 and even before. Not only 1992, and even before. They have been here in power. I've read from 1992 to 2002, and honestly, the board is the same. They just keep moving across. This time, I'm the opposition. This time, you're the president. This and all that. However, there's one thing that is clear again. The playbook is the same because it's the same people. You do not expect somebody to have a different playbook because they read from a different book. No, you do not expect somebody to behave differently when they read from the same playbook. I do not expect something better from this political class because it's been the same over and over again. Fine. We might say that there was a huge difference when Kibaki was in power. There was. And also, there has been developments in the country. Things have been good, but I think there is a sort of, how can I put it? There is a sort of desperation that is in the country right now because of things not functioning the way they are, from education, and especially education and health. Because one thing I figure that the government can pretty much not do much. No. The government can't really do much for you. The government can only create good infrastructure, good health, and then they create good education for the people. After that, niwewe, ngangana, like solve your own problems if the infrastructure of your country is good. But right now, Aziz, nothing has changed because it's been like that. I feel like if we had people with different ideology and different ways of doing, and if we reimagined our political class to be made of different people, and we were able to give other people chances, we will be in a different position now. But right now, we are where we are at. Anyway, that's it for today. See you on the next one. Bye.